Welcome to another episode of Historical Markers. This week we happen to be in Jackson County, Alabama. Why Alabama? Well, my wife's doing a craft retreat here this week, and so I'm going around this county and looking up the historical markers. So join us as we explore Jackson County. This marker's in front of an old school that's now the school administration building, and this one is for College Hill Historic District. College Hill Historic District, located along College Avenue between Scott and Kyle Streets, was nominated to the National Register of Historic Places in 1979. This district was Scottsboro's first subdivision. The area was part of Charlotte Scott Skelton's inheritance from her parents, Robert Thomas and Elizabeth Parsons Scott, the founders of Scottsboro. The Scott family donated a large plot at the northwest corner of Scott Street and College Avenue for a school. The College Hill Historic District gets its name from the academies, colleges, and public schools which have graced this campus for 130 years. The first school located on this site was the Scott Male and Female Academy, built in 1878. The current building was constructed in 1939. College Avenue's first two homes, built in the 1890s on the two eastern corners, are no longer standing. 5 of the district's original 16 homes were built 1909 to 1907, 4 were built in the 1920s, 3 were constructed in the 1930s, and 2 in the 1940s. In a sequence of construction, the architecture of College Hill Historic District follows the trends of architecture in the southeast. The most unusual are the 2 pyramidal roof houses which appear in low numbers in other areas of Jackson County. These 2 houses were originally constructed in 1909 and 1911. Through the years, several early houses in the College Hill Historic District have been replaced or received major renovations. The development of the College Hill Historic District parallels the development of the Public Square Historic District. College Avenue has been the home of 3 Jackson County probate judges, W.R. Bogart, Henry McAnally, and Robert Bob Hallen, Sr. All families associated with these homes have made lasting contributions to the commercial, civic, and cultural growth of Scottsboro. Many of the residents are descendants of the original families who established the neighborhood. Well, it appears that the marker for the First Baptist Church may be missing. I definitely don't see it here. So anyway, it was supposed to be for this church here. This is the First Baptist Church in Scottsboro, Alabama. And there should have been a marker on that pole. Friendship Park. Long known as the Friendly City, Scottsboro extends an open, warm, and welcoming greeting to its citizens and its visitors. One of the most notable friendships in Scottsboro's long history was born in boyhood, tempered in wartime, and blossomed to maturity during years of service to his community. Charles Raymond Bradford Jr. and Mark Scott Skelton Sr. were best friends for over 75 years. These years were spent as childhood friends, Auburn classmates, neighbors, business partners, community leaders, and dedicated churchmen, involved fully in every aspect of this community's life. Most notable was their leadership and service in Company B, Jackson County's National Guard unit, which was deployed to the Korean War in 1950. After the Korean War ended, Mark and Charles returned to Scottsboro and together started General Equipment Company, which supplied equipment to farmers throughout the area for over 30 years. They raised their families here, gave deeply of themselves to the town and county, led their churches, and stood as positive role models to all who knew them. In retirement, both dedicated their lives again to making Scottsboro a better place. The landscaping along this entrance to Scottsboro stands as a testament to 2 great men and 2 great friends. It is a welcome to our great city. It was made possible by the generous grant by the Bynum Foundation and is a joint effort of the City of Scottsboro and the Alabama Department of Transportation. The decision that saved the sons of Scottsboro. During World War II, Charles Bradford was a soldier attached to the American 106th Division. In 1944, at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, the 106th Division was surrounded by enemy forces when strict obedience to orders were made. Charles Bradford and his fellow soldiers, German prisoners of war. 6 years later, facing a terrifyingly similar situation in a small Korean valley with only one way out, Captain Bradford asked permission to withdraw his men from harm's way. Company B of the 151st Combat Engineer Battalion of the Alabama National Guard, made up of 164 young men from the Scottsboro area, many just teenagers, was trapped in a position he knew was about to be overrun by enemy troops with deadly consequences. Headquarters denied permission to withdraw. Desperate, Captain Bradford again radioed for permission to retreat. This time, before he could be denied again with terrible personal history repeating itself, he ordered the radio switched off. Headquarters could not respond. Company B quickly withdrew on Captain Bradford's own orders. Within minutes, their former position was overrun by thousands of Chinese troops, but Company B was safe. Captain Bradford's bold decision saved the sons of Scottsboro. He always believed the hard common-sense lessons God taught him in Germany on December 21, 1944, enabled him to make a courageous decision on April 21, 1951. In Korea, a decision which saved Company B from certain death. The men of Company B believed it also. Of Captain Bradford and Major Mark Skelton, the men of Company B would say, They recruited us, they trained us, they took us to war, they brought us home safely, and we are forever grateful. The bond formed in Korea, and especially in that valley in April 1951, only grew stronger upon return to Scottsboro. Men and officers revered and respected one another, and all were lifelong friends. This monument stands as a thanksgiving to Almighty God for the men of Company B, to honor their service, to remember the men who led them to Korea and who brought them safely home, and especially to memorialize forever the courageous decision which defied orders but saved the lives of the sons of Scottsboro. And here is the cemetery. This is the Scott Family Cemetery. Robert Thomas Scott, December 1st, 1800 to June 18th, 1863. And he was the founder of Scottsboro. And today it overlooks one of the major intersections in Scottsboro. This marker was dedicated to Mark Scott and Vesta Lou Skelton. Mark is a direct descendant of the Scottsboro's founder, Robert Scott. Mark and Vesta Lou are war veterans, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, civic leaders, and volunteers. They are dedicated to their family and are friends to all who know them. Their contributions to their city, county, state, and country are immeasurable. This marker was placed in 2015. Here we have General Andrew Jackson, soldier, statesman, 7th President of the USA. Jackson County was created by the state legislature on December 13, 1819, while in session in Huntsville, Alabama. The county was named in honor of General Andrew Jackson, who was visiting in Huntsville at the time. This statue was presented by the citizens of Jackson County during the year of the bicentennial. And then they have the bust of Andrew Jackson. Here, also outside the courthouse in Scottsboro, we have Jackson County Courthouse and the Scottsboro Boys. Constructed in 1911 to 1912 and designed by architect Richard H. Hunt, the Jackson County Courthouse is a neoclassical brick building situated on a town square in Scottsboro, the county seat of Jackson County. The front two-story portico is supported by 4 stone columns of the Doric order. A cupola on top contains the Seth Thomas clock. This courthouse was the site of the first of the Scottsboro Boys' trials. 2 white women accused 9 black teenagers of rape on March 25, 1931, while riding a freight train as it passed through Jackson County. In April 1931, at the first of 4 trials, a jury convicted 8 of the 9 defendants and sentenced them to death. The judge declared a mistrial in the case of 1 defendant. Soon after the guilty verdicts, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and the International Labor Defense came to the defense of the Scottsboro Boys, contending the trials were unconstitutional. The United States Supreme Court overturned the verdicts and new trials were held in Decatur, Alabama. After a series of trials, convictions, and overturned decisions, a compromise was reached in 1938, with some of the Scottsboro Boys freed immediately and the others released by 1950. In 1976, Alabama Governor George C. Wallace pardoned the last living Scottsboro boy. 2 landmark United States Supreme Court decisions arose directly from this case. In Patterson v. Alabama in 1932, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the defendants were denied the right to effective legal counsel, and in Norris v. Alabama in 1935, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the defendants had not received equal protection under the law because Jackson County juror rolls excluded African Americans. Many consider the Scottsboro case and its aftermath one of the beginnings of the civil rights movement in America. This marker is for the Jones House. The Jones House was constructed in 1907 in the 2nd subdivision recorded in the Scottsboro City Plat in 1889. The steep pyramidal roof, thin wooden columns, large interior chimney, and veranda that surrounds 3 sides exhibit overtones of the French colonial style. The house was purchased in 1909 by Mr. and Mrs. Robert E. Jones, Sr., who maintained the residence until death of Mrs. Jones in 1966. Their children were Rudolph, Cecil, and Ruth Jones, Sadie Jones, Snodgrass, and Robert E. Bob Jones, Jr., who was born in this house on June 12, 1912. A graduate of Jackson County High School and the University of Alabama School of Law, Robert E. Jones, Jr. was admitted to the bar in January 20th, 1937. After practicing law in Scottsboro, he was elected judge of Jackson County in 1940. He served in the U.S. Navy from December 1943 to February 1946 in both the Atlantic and Pacific theaters, and as a member of the legal staff of General Douglas MacArthur. And here is the house that this plaque is in front of. Robert E. Jones, Jr. In 1946, Robert E. Jones, Jr. was elected to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives to fill Alabama's 5th Congressional District seat, vacated by John J. Sparkman's election to the U.S. Senate. Elected to 15 consecutive terms, 1946 to 1976, Congressman Jones became Alabama's longest-serving representative. The Robert E. Jones Bridge that spans the Tennessee River east of Scottsboro was dedicated to his honor in September of 1985. Congressman Jones is remembered for his ardent support of legislation leading to the expansion of the Tennessee Valley Authority, construction of the nation's interstate highway system, development of the U.S. space program, protection of the environment, and construction of major public works that included the Kentucky Center of the Performing Arts, the Smithsonian Museum of History and Technology, the National Portrait Gallery, and the Madison Annex to the Library of Congress. He retired to Scottsboro in 1977, where he lived until his death in 1997. This marker in Scottsboro, Alabama is for Robert Thomas Scott Sr., successful pioneer. A brick Scottsboro depot completed in January 1861 became the business center of Scottstown, Platte. During the Civil War, Union troops burned Scott's grist mill and shingle mill. Scott's death at age 62 was attributed to stress at the hands of Union troops. His will instructed the heirs to donate lots for public purposes, as it should be deemed necessary to grow up the town. Although Scott had been unsuccessful in relocating the county seat from Bellefonte, county offices were moved to Scottsboro 5 years after his death. He and his wife, Elizabeth Ann Parsons Scott, their son, Dr. Robert T. Scott, Jr., and several of the elder Scott's grandchildren are buried in the Scott Family Cemetery. Here in front of the courthouse is the marker for Robert Thomas Scott, 1800 to 1863. Planter, tavern operator, newspaper editor, legislator, and land developer, he sought in vain to have the Jackson County seat moved from Bellefonte to the settlement that bore his name. After his death in 1863, his widow reached agreement in 1868 with the county government, whereby the site for the courthouse and jail was deeded to Jackson County on condition that Scottsboro become the county seat. Incorporated by the state legislature on January 20th, 1870, the town became an important commercial center and railroad shipping point on the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. Robert Thomas Scott Sr., Scottsboro founder. Robert T. Scott, born in 1800 into a prominent North Carolina family who originally settled in Maryland, founded the Alabama town that bears his name. Between 1848 and 1858, he acquired 1,240 acres of choice land in the heart of Jackson County. Prior to 1850, he moved his family from Bellefonte to a home site that soon included a family cemetery. He established a grist mill and a shingle mill. In 1854, Scott persuaded the Memphis and Charleston Railroad Company to route tracks through his acreage and benefited the fledgling village known as Scott's Mill. As the tracks were laid, Scott sold lots on both sides of the railroad line that stimulated additional economic development. The first M&CCR passenger arrived at the station's wooden platform by March 1856. The community was renamed Scottsboro in 1858. This marker in Scottsboro is at the depot. It says the Scottsboro Railroad Depot. The Memphis and Charleston Railroad Company constructed the Scottsboro Railroad Depot in 1860 to 1861 as a passenger and freight facility. The rail line ran throughout the Confederacy, and the Union considered its capture vital to cutting off supplies to the South. On January 8, 1865, the depot was the site of an intense battle between the 101st U.S. Colored Infantry and the 110th U.S. Colored Infantry, who held the depot, and Confederate soldiers led by Brigadier General H.B. Lyon. The outnumbered Union soldiers defended the station until Confederate artillery fire drove them from the building. In 1870, newly incorporated Scottsboro designated the depot as the center point of town when laying out the city limits. With the completion of the new building in 1891, the depot stopped handling passenger traffic. The depot remained important in the economic and social activity of the city until the 1960s. The depot is one of only 3 remaining pre-Civil War railroad depots in the state of Alabama. And here's the depot, right next to the railroad tracks. and it is now a museum, open on Fridays. This marker, also just outside the depot in Scottsboro, Union Civil War encampment in Scottsboro. In late December 1863, Union Major General John A. Logan established his 5th Army Corps headquarters in Scottsboro, Alabama. On January 11, 1864, by command of General Logan, Brigadier General Hugh Ewing, command of the 4th Division, was ordered to guard the railroad and telegraph line from Scottsboro to Stevenson. General Ewing sent his 1st Brigade under the command of General Reuben Williams to Scottsboro, and it set up 4 separate regimental camps on either side of the Memphis and Charleston Railroad, adjacent to or within 1 block of the Scottsboro Depot. The regiments under Colonel Williams' command included some 3,000 men of the 26th Illinois, the 70th Ohio, and 12th Indiana, and 97th Indiana, as well as an Illinois artillery battery. After the war, Colonel Williams returned to Indiana and established the Warsaw Daily Times. In his 1904 Civil War memoir, he included an in-depth description of the facilities created within the Scottsboro encampment and his troops' military and social activities between December 26, 1863 and May 1, 1864. In the early spring of 1864, Colonel Williams coordinated a successful dance in a building located on Main Street, now Maple Avenue, that served as Scottsboro's first school and church. He wrote that the site was large enough for the waltz and gavotte. The dance was attended by his officers and their visiting wives, enlisted men, and local ladies who were transported by military ambulances to the Scottsboro encampment. Around the courthouse here in Scottsboro, Alabama, we also have in honor of Captain Charles R. Bradford. And then here's a marker of all of those who served. There's also a nice Veterans Memorial here in front of the Scottsboro Courthouse, dedicated to the men who died while serving their country in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. This is erected by the veterans of Jackson County. And if we look, we can see World War II, the people, World War II, 3 whole plaques for World War II. Then we get World War I, Korea, and Vietnam. Well, that was Jackson County, Alabama. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We learned a lot of information, a lot of Civil War stuff happening in this area. And so, if you're ever in the area, look up some of these markers and see what you can see.